We've had 4 storms so far this hurricane season. The first one was Arlene, a tropical storm in the southern Gulf that really struggled to get its act together due to a cold front pushing through. We also had Brett that made its way through the Caribbean, producing heavy rains and tropical storm force winds for the Lesser Antilles. Then we had Cindy, a fish storm that stayed north of the Caribbean islands, as well as our first hurricane of the season. It took a while to become one, but Don did eventually after doing some loop-de-loops there in the North Atlantic just a little while ago. Now, here's a look at your sea surface temperatures. You see all those reds on the screen. That screams warning signs for hurricanes, at least tropical storms for sure. Temperatures are all the way on up to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which is quite dangerous. We're going to go ahead and give you a look in this video at what you can expect the rest of hurricane season. So go ahead and like and subscribe. Here's a look at the typical areas to watch into August with your tropical activity, and you can see there's 2 main zones, one in the Gulf Stream right off the east coast for us here and pushing into the North Atlantic, but the main zone especially comes right out of the main development region there in portions of the Atlantic, and then that pushes straight on over into the Lesser Antilles. But notice how those 2 areas connect as storms tend to push their way towards the east coast, as well as another secondary zone there in the Gulf of Mexico as we go into September. That's what you can normally expect and during that peak time of the hurricane season. That's what your typical areas to watch are. And as you can see, September 1st is basically right when we start to see that peak occur, with the most hurricanes occurring between September and October in that time frame for you there. Now let's go ahead and move on over now to the look at some of those tropical cyclone points of origin from 1851 to 2015. Look at every single one of these red dots on your screen. That's exactly where all of these storms got started during that time frame. Now, according to climate.gov, El Nino suppresses Atlantic hurricane activity by increasing the amount of sinking motion and increasing the atmospheric stability, which is why there isn't the expectation for fewer hurricanes due to stronger vertical wind shear into portions of the Atlantic, while there should be more hurricanes into portions of the Pacific. Makes sense because those waters are warmer. But nonetheless, we do have warmer water in the Atlantic than expected, which is why our hurricane season is expected to be near average. But here's the deal, we have another limiting factor, and that this is good. Dry air means less storms. You can see that really affecting and suppressing that moisture. A lot more browns on your screen there in the Atlantic than you see greens. And then in terms of what to watch, you can see some of that moisture trying to filter in as we go into August, but notice how there's still some of those yellow colors indicating some drier air filtering in. That's what we need to watch as we head into our August, because that could mean that these systems try to get suppressed a little bit. But we do have some things to watch right now, so we're going to go ahead and hop right on over to that in just a moment. But let's look at the projections versus so far. First, you can see your 2023 Atlantic hurricane season outlook indicated 12 to 17 named storms. We've gotten 4 so far, but remember, we're not to the peak yet. We've had 1 hurricane, but 0 major hurricanes, so that's something to watch very closely, as 1 or 2 of those should get going here probably within the next month or 2 if this is going as planned, according to the National Hurricane Center. And then here we go, looking at our current July 25th, 2023 tropical outlook. 20% chance of development just north of the Lesser Antilles from the system that's coming off of Africa. Then a 10% of development right along the southeast coast. But notice how there's that one there in the Caribbean. I would not worry too much about that system. That one is on the decrease in terms of its intensity. Now let's move on now to give you a look at what that looks like played out. And you can see the interesting trend from the GFS as it moves this system westward, bringing this just north of the Caribbean islands as a fairly strong system. In fact, not a fairly strong system, a very strong system, and 951 millibar low. That's pretty much a major hurricane pushing north of the Lesser Antilles. So let's track this with the European model, what to watch with that distant interest. Notice how we have that cold front, as well as the high pressure system. The flow of the high pressure system should push this right up into that cold front and really destroy the system if the European model is correct. But if you go by the GFS model, look at how it pushes that major hurricane south of the entity there, because the cold front would be further north, and that high pressure being further off to the east would mean that it would not be, taken away by that high pressure system, causing a completely different story. So no matter what plays out, we do need to watch this severe weather outlook for your Wednesday, July 26th. As you can see, a level 3 threat for you there in that Great Lakes region from portions of Detroit, back on over into portions of Indiana and Ohio as well, getting in on that. We definitely need to watch those areas for gusty winds 60 to 70 miles per hour, the potential for 1 to 2 inch hail, but also this, you can see that tornado outlook is not 0, so that is something we definitely need to watch during that time. Let's go ahead and cover this line of storms making its way out of Minnesota for the night tonight. Let's go ahead and cover how that's going to affect our forecast for your Wednesday. So here's a look at playing this out on Future Radar. You can see this line pushing eastward with that Boeing segment. We could see some 70, 80 mile per hour wind gusts into the overnight hours and into the early morning into portions of places like Wausau here, into portions of Wisconsin, as well as portions of southern Wisconsin and southeastern Minnesota. Look at how this line progresses eastward during the day. That would be a damaging wind threat, but also notice these isolated cells out ahead of it, as well as some of the ones on the southern flank. That's why the tornado threat is higher down into portions of Ohio, as well as into Indiana and the Detroit metro area. And then look at how this could produce some very damaging winds pushing straight over portions of Lake Erie. And then this system progresses eastward as the evening goes on.